Alright, for my final Homeland Security project, I have chosen to do a presentation on the response or lack thereof to COVID and what could be done to prevent a future disease from causing the amount of problems that it did. Alright, so first up, what the pandemic taught us. Very quickly into the pandemic, it became clear that there were no measures in place to deal with a threat like that, nor were the elected officials prepared to deal with it. And much of that comes from the overarching problem with Homeland Security, where there's a lot of work towards solving yesterday's problems compared to tomorrow's threats. Starting from where COVID began, international travel. There were no systems in place to check or monitor the health of people traveling into and out of the United States. Now, if there had been, it's possible it would have been caught earlier and the damage done minimized. Of course, that can't be known for sure. Beyond that, once it became clear that there was no keeping the disease out of the United States, excuse me, there were no systems after. Yeah, sorry. There were no systems in place for the public or government to follow, and a lack of resources available to public health industry were readily apparent as hospitals filled up and general PPE became difficult to find even for healthcare workers. And arguably the most noticeable lesson from COVID was the near halt in the economy, as many businesses went under and many people became unemployed through no fault of their own. And finally, a lack of education on what the general public is to do or could do to minimize the spreading of a disease was shown as things were just being spewed out over the news as opposed to real information being available, and then giving the people the know-how on how to keep themselves or others safe. So what could be done? As to many of the issues presented before, the answer is simply preparedness. But that does come in many different ways when faced with several different issues that, like the ones that came from COVID. To start, there has to be a plan in place for what the government can do to minimize risk to the states, starting at international travel. While there is no doubt a lack of oh, I'm sorry. While there is undoubtedly no lack of security on airlines, there is no form of health checks prior to entering or leaving a country. Something as simple as a temperature check or a short questionnaire could prevent from people with potentially contagious illnesses from spreading into other passengers and then ultimately the country they intend to arrive on. While that is not a foolproof plan to prevent the spread of diseases into our country, like with diseases that would not cause a fever, something like that, it's at least a preventative measure. The next area that needs improving would be the public healthcare system, as the lack of resources available resulted in hospitals being over capacity and those who needed aid not being able to receive it. By better funding the public healthcare system, more people would be able to get the urgent help as needed, and equipment would not have been on back order for as long as it was, despite being the like in this case, it was the PPE and then the ventilators as well. This could also include an improved method of testing mass amounts of people, as that too became a problem, as they were trying to pop up test facilities and various like closed down stores and such. Now, with what came of the economy during the lockdowns, demonstrated a lack of security for the working class of the United States, as many lost their jobs, and to remedy that, funds could be put aside to help small businesses pay employees during the time they are down, or offer pay it back plans so that they could make up for it when things got more back to normal and business could pick up. Now, finally, a lack of education on what to do with when a outbreak does occur or could occur led to most of the country not understanding how they could keep themselves or others safe. Now, this could begin as early as in schools or even a short amount of training at people's places of work. And it could have made a huge impact on the level of understanding that people would have on what actually works compared to having to go day by day as new rules are being poured out through the news and other media. Now, essentially, it all boils down to dollars and transparency. So, how viable are plans like this? For starters, implementing a quick health screen at international airports would ultimately change nothing in terms of the amount of work the TSA has to do, and the cost of doing so wouldn't be much more than getting the tools required to check someone's temperature. Now, when dealing with the already extensive safety measures in place at airports, being checked for a fever or other signs of illness wouldn't be any more invasive or take up much time as the general security checks already do. Now, and then possibly the most expensive area of this plan is increasing funding and support for public health care facilities and staff. Now, with public health budget already nearing around $2 trillion as of 23, or excuse me, as of 22, and accounting for almost 30% of the federal outlays, it would seem that there would be enough to support an influx of patients, but obviously that was not the case when hospitals filled up from COVID patients. If that did nothing other than demonstrate a need for a larger budget, even if something else would have to be lowered to even things out. Now, this would also expand the need for healthcare workers, and that could be filled if various incentives were provided by the government for people to attend medical school or make medical school more affordable. Now, as for the loss of income for many people, the attempt to make up for it with stimulus checks quickly became inviable. However, if there was a fund set aside for such serious emergencies, similar to how Social Security works for retirement, there could be the money wouldn't have to be paid back in such a way as it was with the stimulus checks through, and taking it out of the end of the year taxes. It could be implemented into the already expensive taxes. No. And then for the education, as children, we're taught what to do in the events of all kinds of emergencies, from tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, and all other ones. But little to none is taught on what to do in the event of a pandemic or other rapid spread of a disease. And spending even a short amount of time teaching what to do in schools or workplaces like before would cost very little, as it could be implemented already into the education with the training for other emergencies, and it would at least give people an idea of what works versus what does not. Now, with these options in mind, the far most expensive aspect would be a fund to support people out of work due to the pandemic. However, with the minimal cost of the others, having a real plan or resources in place in the event of another COVID-19 or similar disease outbreak could save the U.S. lots of lives and lots of money. Now, the cost versus risk would either way would have to be discussed and resolved by the Homeland Security Board, but the issues presented absolutely fall under the territory, as it is no different from other threats that face the United States, as it puts people's lives in danger and the economy. All right, thank you for listening.